Free, the eighth track from Prince's 1999 album, is the subject of the latest episode of the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast. Be glad that you are free, free to change your mind, free to listen to podcasts that dissect lyrics of popular musicians, and free to join me on this particular episode is Laura Tiebert. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Jason. Glad to be here.
Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you.
This is first episode that you've done with me for the 1999 album. So it's been a little bit. Can you just say hi to the listeners and maybe provide them a little bit of update to what you've been doing and since your last appearance on the show? Or
yeah, of course. Oh my gosh, thanks so much. Yeah, so I am an author. I am the co-author of a book called The Rise of Prince, which I wrote with Alex Hahn, a Prince biographer. And this whole crazy journey of being a Prince author started, in 2016 for me. Our family moved to Chanhassen from Chicago 3 weeks before Prince died. And I've always been a Prince fan. And I reached out to Alex and, together we wound up writing the book. And, as I was writing that book, I kind of realized that Prince had obviously left this incredible musical legacy, but he'd also left a gift, hiding in plain sight. And that was how he lived his life. And I realized he'd left clues about how to live this extraordinary life through these deliberate decisions he made. Prince was very intentional. And that inspired me to embark on a year-long project, which I began in January 2019. And it's called Crazy Amazing, the Year of Living Like Prince. So that's what I'm doing on my blog, lauratiebert.com. And it's changed my life in ways I could never have imagined. And the hope is that it will change the lives of a lot of people as they learn about it.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting journey you're on. And I've been following it as well through your blog. And, you're really up to a lot of really cool things, Laura. And I imagine a lot of that is, as you mentioned, your uncomfort zone, I think, from a previous episode, which is very cool, but kind of scary at the same time, right?
That's right. But, Prince has, he always pushed people, right? And in a strange way, just through my own research about him, I think he inspired me to push my own self. So, so I am the purple guinea pig trying all sorts of crazy things. And November's theme is form a band. So I have been putting together a band of people in my own field. Mm-hmm. And then December's theme is going to be outrageously generous because, we know now so much about Prince's quiet philanthropy. So I've got something big planned where people can join in and we're going to work to raise money for something that was dear to Prince's heart.
Wow. Sounds great. Sounds great. Can't wait to learn more about that.
Yeah, thanks.
And as you mentioned, it is the season. So this song, Free, is a bit of a left turn for Prince. And that's the song we're going to be doing together today is Free from 1999. And it's a bit of a left turn on this record. So for the entire album up to this point, it's been a very, Lindrum machine, synthesizer-driven album. And it's filled with lyrics that, imply love, lust, heartache, all intertwined with a bit of technology and maybe a little bit of a fear of the future. But Free is a bit of a different track, than those other songs that have come before it. It's more piano-driven than synthesizer-driven, and it's a ballad, but it's not a love ballad. It's a slow song, but it's not based off of, relationships or talking about love in the traditional sense that, ballads have been kind of become known for. It comes across like as a very sincere song that's meant to be uplifting and for us to kind of take stock in what we have and be thankful for it, and which is very fitting. This episode is being recorded right around the time of Thanksgiving, and whether it's Thanksgiving or Christmas, those are two holidays where, it's a good time to reflect on our lives and who's important to us, taking stock, like I said, in what we have, and not necessarily talking about material things, but just what are the good things in our lives that we want to be thankful for and to show appreciation for. And Free is kind of one of those songs for me personally that does that. How about for yourself, Laura?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's Free is a love song. It's a love song to freedom. I mean, freedom was, near and dear to Prince's heart. I mean, it was one of the great themes of his work throughout his life. And it's arguably the most important theme, but it's certainly one of the top, two or three themes that he came back to time and time again. And it is a left turn on this album. I mean, I visited the org, prince.org, to get a flavor for what people thought of Free, and I was sort of shocked to find that it was very polarizing. A
Hmm.
lot of people don't even think it belongs on the album. It's I guess you either love it or hate it. So I'm kind of curious to hear what you think, Jason. What camp you fall into, because it certainly is, it is a different, it sort of does go to the beat of its own drum, right? It doesn't fit, with a lot of the feel of these other songs, but it to me, it's a very significant song in Prince's body of work.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And in Free is, even though it's a left turn, at this point in the record, it's the eighth song. If you had the double LP, it would be the last song on the third side, or side C. So it closes out that half of the record. And it's time for a break, I mean, we've had up to this point a lot of songs that are starting to get, as brilliant as they are and as creative as they are, they're starting to get a little same sounding in terms of very Lindrum heavy, drum machine, synthesizer driven songs. We've had DMSR, we've had Automatic, we've had Something in the Water, all very kind of cold and robotic sounds. Even though DMSR is a party song, the way it was created is that way, and using that technology that Prince was really into at the time. But this song harkens back more to some of his other strengths, which, I mean, he's obviously a very brilliant piano player, and that translates to his ability to play his synthesizers. And so we got some piano in this song. We really haven't heard a lot of piano up to this point on this record. And the second half of the song, you start getting guitar again. And now guitar's been interspersed throughout the album here and there, but it's not. This isn't a very guitar heavy album, I wouldn't say. And this song is just, I think it's needed. I think it is a good break for a lot of the themes. Because if you did yet another song about, a bad relationship, or feeling kind of crummy about a girl that he's met, we needed a new theme, and Free does that. Free offers that new theme to the album, and while if people don't like it, maybe they don't like it because it's slow. Maybe they think it's boring. I don't know why people wouldn't like this song. I think it's a great song. It's beautiful.
It's a beautiful song. I agree. Okay, I'm glad we are on the same page with Free.
I
But
mean,
yeah, I mean,
I
you
love
know,
this album so much, so there's no
yeah.
bad songs on it for me personally.
No, and you know what? We should note we're recording this, in anticipation of the re-release, right, of
Yeah.
the extended version of
Yep.
1999 on Friday, and yeah, so that's like Christmas morning for Prince fans, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a lot to be thankful for. That'll be an exciting time. But yeah, I do agree. On 1999, he's challenging people, on a sexual, social, I mean, sometimes even political level, right? I mean, it's very dramatic, and most artists weren't doing that. I mean, they stayed within certain boundaries, and he was trying to get people to think in wider ways, and he was really pushing the boundaries of pop. So yeah, I guess here we have, maybe a little room to breathe and stretch out. with Free. And you're right, it does feel like a much needed pause and in the album. And I remember how Free made me feel, when I heard 1999. I remember it's got a very intimate feel because of the piano, and his voice is very vulnerable, and it's beautiful. I think it is needed on the album.
Yeah, and if people are ragging on it for being kind of sappy and overly patriotic, I mean, I don't really get that personally from listening to it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being thankful that you are in a position to make choices for yourself. And like you said earlier, freedom, Prince was all about freedom, freedom of expression, freedom from his record label later on in his career. I mean, emancipation, freedom, hello. So it's all right there. And of course, he couldn't foresee those struggles in 1982 when he wrote the song, but it's very clear that this is an important topic to him. And I never got the sense that Prince was one to write a song to just appease a portion of the population. Like, he wasn't thinking to himself, well, in order to gain the widest audience, I have to put a real patriotic song in there. I don't get that there's anything but sincerity in his voice on this track, and it isn't a calculated. I didn't feel like it was a calculated move in order to push more units, because this song is buried in the second half. It wasn't a single, so if that was the intent of it, it was misguided.
Right.
So that's why I don't think it was the intent.
No, I don't. I don't get that either. I mean, honestly, too, there's been a lot of talk now about 1999, in terms of publicity before the release, and I was sort of struck that maybe some of this does relate to Warner's, and we're just seeing the very, very beginning of that with Prince, because Bobby Z told The Current that even with 1999, Prince was starting to get frustrated with Warner's. I mean, he made this double album, right? He was producing so much work during this time period. He wrote Free in April of 1982, right? And he was just so prolific, and he was able to, keep up this incredible pace. He wanted to be like James Brown, putting out an album every 6 months. And even though 1999 to me, and I know probably to a lot of listeners, was an introduction to Prince, this is album number 5.
Yeah.
This was not to Prince and the band. According to Bobby, it felt like this was a long time. This was a long haul. And Prince was already, according to Bobby, Prince was already chafing against the constraints of Warner. So, I think that we can read some of that into these lyrics, but I don't want to get ahead of us.
Yeah. I mean, certainly, if you get to that point in the lyrics, then you feel like some of those lines can point to that. Certainly, bring that up, because for me, I never think of Prince fighting his record label until the 90s, and so it's really interesting to hear that perspective. And I didn't listen to that interview with Bobby Z, so I wasn't aware of that. So that's very interesting to me. So please chime in with those comments if there's lines in the song that you think really kind of point to his frustration already growing with his record label, even as early as 1982, for sure.
Yeah, well, it's Prince. I mean, we know from all the research that Prince was impatient, to put it nicely. So, in a way, It's not surprising that this was starting to bubble up in 1982. But,
No.
But yeah, certainly. I mean, I don't read this as even though there are political tones to it, I don't read it as solely a political or patriotic statement. I mean, kind of far from it. I think there are a lot of other layers to it that are not, that go well beyond patriotism. That's sort of the surface view of it, I think. But yeah. We'll talk.
Yeah. So that's a good segue into actually starting to talk about the lyrics of the song. Yeah. But before we do that, I have to ask you, because the song opens up and there's a lot of sound effects on this album, and we can thank Sunset Sound Studios, I'm assuming, for a lot of those sounds and interesting sonic tidbits that he puts in this record. So there's some sounds that open up that song, and I have very distinct ideas in my mind what those sounds are, but I want to get your opinion, Laura. What do you hear when this song opens up before it even gets to the piano and the lyrics?
I have always heard the sound of marching boots in the rain. Yeah, have you heard anything different?
No, I hear marching too, and kind of sounds like waves crashing a little bit. There's some, and the rain makes sense as well. There's obviously, to me, there's water somewhere in the background, and I kind of hear like the sound of waves crashing, and it made me think a little bit of like soldiers storming the beach at Normandy in World War II. Mm-hmm. That's just one visualization I get when I hear that. But yeah, to me, it is boots on the ground, kind of marching along, and there's some water in the background, whether it's rain or waves from the ocean or what have you. But that's what I've always heard. I've read other people's interpretations of that sound at the beginning of the song, and it is not that. Like, they have some pretty interesting, and I wouldn't say far out there because everybody's opinion is valid, but and our interpretation is valid. But I've heard some things like, really? You get that out of that? Because I never got anything but that, and so sounds like we're on the same page. Part of it, I'm sure, because of the lyrics of the song, what the song is, on the surface about. I try to visualize what that sound could be in the context of what the lyrics are telling us and what the song seems to be telling us. And that's why I get boots. And that's why I get, because, if you're talking about fighting for your freedom, and in the bridge, as we get to the bridge, there's some lines in there that lend some credence to what you and I are hearing in that beginning. So it's not lyrics, and I want to spend a lot of time on it, but because it is open to interpretation, I wanted to, of course, get your interpretation. So we're on the same page.
Well, I get a kick out of the sound effects, and honestly, sometimes Prince could be Mr. Literal, and like a cab driver with a cab honking, beep, beep, So I guess I just took it literally because that's how he used the sound effects in other songs. I mean, I sort of got the feeling that Prince might have, it felt like a kid in a candy store with all these cool sound effects, and but certainly there may be more to it than we're hearing. So I always like to hear what others take from it. But to me, boots on the ground in the rain.
Okay.
For sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've got that established. So now we've got lyrics. The first lyrics to the song, with the piano in the background, he sings over the piano, "Don't sleep until the sunrise. Listen to the falling rain. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about your pain. Don't cry unless you're happy. Don't smile unless you're blue. Never let that lonely monster take control of you." So he's kind of telling us to set aside our worries and our fears in some ways. And some of these fears, at times I'm thinking, is he even singing this song to himself in some ways? Because he expresses a lot of fear in the rest of the album up to this point. Fear of nuclear war, fear of not being able to... What's the line in Little Red Corvette where he says that he's...
Oh, yeah. Wondering if I had enough
class. So that's kind of like an insecurity. That's kind of a fear as well. He expresses fear in... like automatic and something in the water, of fear about his inability to satisfy another woman that he's interested in. So in some ways I think of that, but for the most part I just take from this first verse that he's kind of setting the tone for the song about being very poetic. These lines are very poetic, talking about sunrise and rain, and then the third line, "Don't cry unless you're happy. Don't smile unless you're blue." What do you get from the first verse overall and those lines in particular, Laura?
Well, I think you're on to something. I was going to ask you if you thought he was singing this to himself, because it sounds like a lullaby, doesn't it? The way he sings it. It's almost like the way you'd sing to a child.
Hmm.
And it's of course, we know Prince didn't sleep till the sunrise often, so I guess he
Yep.
was following his own advice. But, I do have to say that Don't Sleep Till the Sunrise, Listen to the Falling Rain. This album is an album of great first lines. I feel like he really was putting some effort into his writing. And, from Something in the Water, people tell me I've got great legs, or Little Red Corvette. I guess I should have known by the way she parked her car sideways that it wouldn't last. I mean, these are great first lines.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I just want to note that, like, that is some really killer writing he's doing here. But yeah, I think it's really poignant. The line you brought up, don't cry unless you're happy, don't smile unless you're blue. Never let the lonely monster take control of you. I mean, to me, the lonely monster is depression,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and we know that Prince struggled with depression. I mean, we know that, for example, from, Judith Hill, testified to that in her investigation documents, that Prince was suffering with depression, feeling very down at the end of his life. We know that was something. So it's very poignant, the way he's saying, don't sleep, don't worry, don't cry, don't let the lonely monster. I mean, it's all what, I guess what not to do, but it's also very sort of childlike and tender.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he sings this song in his falsetto in a very tender way. So he's not. So his falsetto has obviously been part of the way he's sang songs up to this point very regularly. But 1999 is an album where he kind of breaks away from that for the first time, consistently breaks away from that. And for this song, because it's a bit of a ballad and it's slow, and he tends to go to his upper register for ballads. He's always done that, and throughout his career, and so it makes sense for him to sing this song in his falsetto, and it's done very tenderly and very gently, and it matches the music and matches the tone of the song, so it makes sense that he's not going to, sing these lyrics really aggressively, and fast, because that's not what the point he's trying to make with this. Like you said, a lullaby is something that you want to sing very softly and very sweetly and very tenderly to the person, whether it's yourself or whether it's to somebody else or to an audience. And it's very clear to me that he sings it that way for a reason, to really drive home the point that this is supposed to be a very sincere and tender song.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the way he opens it is such a contrast from the boots, right? The boom, boom, boom,
Hmm.
right? You hear the army marching, and then it's so delicate the way he opens it with the piano and the falsetto, and it's a huge contrast. It's really, really brilliant. It's sort of the harshness of this sort of outside world, and then there's this cocoon, right, of tenderness inside of it.
Yeah, good point. That's a nice way of putting it for sure. So after that first verse, it goes into the chorus. The chorus is, "Be glad that you are free, free to change your mind, free to go most anywhere, anytime. Be glad that you are free. There's many a man who's not. Be glad for what you had, baby, what you've got. Be glad for what you've got." And now we're in the chorus. So the chorus, it kind of reinforces the notion that was brought up earlier about his appreciation for his position, appreciation for our position as listeners to his music, because one can maybe assume, maybe not completely accurately assume, but for the most part, if you're listening to a Prince album in 1982, the chances are you're living in a possibly democratic society, or at least in a society that allows art to be expressed and to be consumed, as opposed to living in like a dictatorship or some sort of tyrannical society where a Prince album might get banned, especially this one. But at this point, he's had several albums with some questionable lyrics and some controversial topics. So if you can listen to the song and you can hear him sing these words, you're probably in a position that mirrors Prince's, where being thankful that you have those freedoms, that you can go anywhere anytime, that you can think what you want. And if you think one way, tomorrow you can change your mind, and that's okay. Because once again, there's many a man who's not free. And he's talking about, I'm assuming, not just, freedom in the world, but also, and this may be a stretch, but I also think of, mental health a little bit. Mm-hmm. People who are not free in their mind. They may be living in the United States or living in Europe and living in a democratic society, but in their mind, they may not feel like they're free because of, a mental health issue that they may have, where they're self-doubting or self-loathing and a little bit paralyzed by fear to go places and do things. What else do you get from the chorus?
Yeah, you know what? That brings up the line from Starfish and Coffee. If you'd set your mind free, baby, right? So there's all kinds of freedom, and inner freedom is certainly one that he talks about more and more as his career goes on. We'll get to those someday, right? When we talk about free yourself
someday
from 2015. Maybe old and gray, but we'll still be talking. But yeah, I think that Prince, listen, he was very concerned with freedom, from the beginning of his career. I wanted to just quote something that Prince said in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction speech in 2004. Can I just say a couple lines about what he said? Okay.
Yep.
So this is how he started his acceptance speech. He said, "When I first started out in this music industry, I was most concerned with freedom to produce, freedom to play all the instruments on my records, freedom to say anything I wanted to. And after much negotiation, Warner Brothers Records granted me that freedom, and I thank them for that." So that very much is where his head is at. Even in 1982, even as a 24-year-old, he was very aware of, how much freedom should be valued, whether and freedom to change your mind, right? That's an inner freedom to go most anywhere, anytime. That's an external freedom, right? So he's sort of citing the various forms. And what's really striking to me is how he just keeps saying, be glad. He says, be glad 4 times in this chorus. So it is it is a song that's full of gratitude for what he has. That's pretty much what I get out of it too.
Yeah, and honestly, as much as at the end of the day with his Warner Brothers contract, he really struggled with them and getting out of it at this point in his career. So by 1982, he had, obviously shown that he could produce, arrange, write, record music on his own without any help if he didn't need it. But the fact that he was granted, for the most part, the freedom to play all the instruments, which was one of the selling points for his contract, let's be honest, but also produce his own music at such a young age. And when he says there's many a man who's not, well, that's practically every other artist out there making music was not granted this freedom. Record companies have to put money into artists. They have to back them with finance, with money. And so in order to recoup that, they want something in return. They want to be able to recoup the money that they've invested in these artists. And if they don't think that, for the most part, an artist it's wise for them to have complete, total control over every aspect of what they do, then they're not going to allow that. They're going to say, well, we're not going to give you the money to make this record unless you have an outside producer or you get a co-writer or whatever. And we've seen it countless times. Most artists have to establish themselves first before they're given this kind of freedom. And he was kind of just given to him off faith. And that's pretty impressive. And I'm glad, when you had that quote from his induction, it does look like he understood and really kind of took stock of that decision that Warner Brothers made with him in the early days, and he may be expressing some of that thankfulness right here in this song as well, is that freedom he was given, knowing that a lot of people don't get that.
That's right. And if you read this song as Prince talking to himself, it's a reminder, right? Be glad that you're free. There's many a man who's not, and I think too, something that is really important to understanding Prince, and it's something we wrote about extensively in The Rise of Prince, not to make a blatant pitch, but if you if you read The Beautiful Ones, Prince's memoir, our book covers that time period, right? 1958 to 1988, but it goes way in depth. So if you're curious about anything that Prince was writing about, I would refer you to our book. And and one of the things we wrote about was actually Prince's ancestry. And Prince had one ancestor in particular. It would be his great-great-grandfather, Edward Nelson. And Edward Nelson was the son of a slave owner in Louisiana named John Nelson, and a Cherokee woman who was a freed slave. And Edward was sort of a rebellious spirit who, for all of his adult life, referred to himself as Black. In 1880, he married a Black woman and became a traveling minister for the Colored Methodist Episcopal Church. And he was an advocate for the rights of African Americans. And you know what? This to me is Prince following his lineage. He had ancestors who were fighters for freedom. And I think, it might be important that you and I just know we're two white people, right? Talking about a Black man talking about freedom. And I just want to honor that. But I also want to say that this is very much in Prince's lineage. To have freedom as a huge theme and something he was fighting for day one. And I'm sure he was aware of all this too.
Yeah, that goes back to the whole layers comment that was made earlier. This song has layers, and it has can mean different things to different people depending on your perspective, your place in life, your background, your lineage. It all matters how you interpret these songs. And so thank you for pointing that out, because it is, our background is going to be, we're going to have a little maybe different thoughts than others whom previous generations were not free. The freedoms that we take for granted, and even to this day. So it's good to put that in perspective. So thanks for adding that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's very important to keep this in context, and so thanks for letting me express that.
And then next verse 2 goes, I know your heart is beating, my drummer tells me so. If you take your life for granted, your beating heart will go. So don't sleep until you're guilty, because sinners all are we. There's others doing far worse than us, so be glad that you are free. Verse 2 is really interesting to me. It's a very poetic line. I mean, it's a very poetic verse. The lines in this verse, and in the song in general, but in this verse particularly, each line is very poetic. I know your heart is beating, my drummer tells me so. My drummer, I don't think he's talking about Bobby Z.
That's right.
So, his drummer, for me, is his heart when I'm thinking of this line in particular. I know your heart is beating, my drummer tells me so. So it's an interesting way to phrase that for me. Is that, I mean, do you get a different kind of take on that line, Laura?
Is he saying, I know your heart is beating, or is he saying, I know my heart is beating?
I hear your, but interesting.
Okay, I've
Interesting.
heard both, so I don't know, but it kind of makes a difference, I guess. But literally, Jason, I was going, what does this line remind me of? I know my heart is beating, or I know your heart is beating. My drummer tells me so. And I realized it was from Jesus Loves Me, the childhood
Yeah.
song. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. And the way that Prince is singing this, right? It's such a lullaby-ish kind of delivery. It just is so striking when you end a line and tells me so, because it just evokes Jesus loves me for some reason. Anyway, I was ripping my hair out for a while trying to remember what is
No, it's
this
a good call.
from.
Good
Yeah,
call.
yeah, but it does have that feeling for me. But I think too, you know what else this verse really struck in me, looking at it from the perspective of 2019. The line about if you take your life for granted, your beating heart will go. It reminded me of Way Back Home and his song from Artificial Age, the 2014 album, where he
Mhm.
sings, most of the people in this world are born dead, but I was born alive I was born with this dream outside my head. And the beating heart inside of you, right? That's your soul, that's your passion, that's being born alive, right? You've got this aliveness to you. So don't take your life for granted, because that will go. And to me, that evokes that same idea that he revisited in 2014. Is that is that a
No,
crazy
no,
thought?
it's not crazy because when he says, if you take your life for granted, your beating heart will go, I don't get from that like literally your heart is going to stop and you will die. I get it more just we're in the same context where he's talking about your spirit and what drives people to do great things or be good people. It's just your beating heart, the love that you are able to give others. You can't take life for granted. Can't take people around you for granted. He says life, but life involves people as well. And to not take anybody for granted. The life you live, the people that you love, and what drives you. And obviously, Prince was driven by music. We know this. And so he's maybe saying he's not going to take his life for granted as well. Like if we're thinking of this being, once again, if you could take it from this perspective that he's singing this to himself, don't take your life for granted. Your beating heart will go. So don't take for granted that you're given this gift, this musical gift, that once in a lifetime gift. And he's not going to take it for granted. And at this point, in his career, he's very young still. And so he has a lot of life left. And he's just maybe reminding himself a little bit, don't take for granted this gift you have. Continue to make music, continue to share this gift with others, to continue on. Your spirit will live on then after you're gone if you're able to successfully do this. And you can take a lot of things from that, but that's how I like to think of it personally.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, I think that's right. It harkens back to, his first album, For You. I mean, where he sings, my life with you I share, right? That's what he was doing. Everything. He was sharing his gifts. I mean, God gave him a gift and he was determined to share it. So, yeah, that's a beautiful reading of this. What do you think about the line, don't sleep until you're guilty? Because sinners all are we. What do you think that means? Don't sleep until you're guilty. Do you have any idea?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. That's a tricky line for sure. It's tripped me up as I'm going through these lyrics in preparation for, and even now it trips me up a little bit. I mean, because sinners all are we. What I think he's trying to say, maybe not obviously, but what he's trying to say in my mind is that we all have flaws. We're all flawed human beings, sinners, and so to speak. So don't sleep until you're guilty. Sleep maybe big sleep, death,
Mm,
possibly. But
Yeah.
but what makes us guilty? I'm not sure. That's what I keep getting tripped up around with this line. Don't sleep until you're guilty.
I mean, is it because you're not using your gifts the way you're meant to use them? Don't sleep. I mean, if you think about most of the people in this world are born dead, right? I don't know. I don't.
Yeah, yeah. It is. It is a tricky line. It's a
Yeah.
tricky line.
I'd be curious if listeners have any ideas on that one.
Exactly. We're not Prince. We didn't write the lyrics. All we can do is glean information from from our own mind, but we're not the minds that wrote it. So as good as we can do with that one.
But the next line is pretty clear cut. So we're good.
Yeah, there's others doing far worse than us. So be glad that you are free. Basically cheer up. Things aren't so bad.
That's right.
Things could be a hell of a lot worse.
Yep, that's right.
So then after the second verse, he goes into the chorus again, which is sung the same way, the same lines. But one thing I just wanted to mention with the chorus is the second to last line where it says, be glad for what you had, baby, what you've got. And, I mean, it's a minor thing, but I've always heard that line, be glad for what you have, baby, what you've got. So like, current, present tense, as opposed to past tense using the word had. So the lyrics that I'm reading from online mention that it's had, and when I listen to it again, it does sound like had, even though I've always heard have. And if it is had, if he did write had, and that is the lyrics, be glad for what you had, baby, what you've got, it's a little interesting, it's a little odd to use both past and present tense to talk about be glad for, what you've been given in life. So I guess maybe if it's past and present tense, he could be saying up to this point, be glad for all of that. Be glad that you've lived the life that you've lived up to this point. So be glad for what you've had. And then also what you've got now.
Yeah. You know what? I heard that the same way as you in the past. Be glad for what you have, baby, for what you got. But you know what? That's just repetitive. It's just saying the same thing twice. So it's actually, like, as you said, it's a little more intriguing to have had, the past tense, and now what you've got. So I like that reading. I never heard it that way until I saw the lyrics, written out.
Me neither. So yeah, I'm glad and I've mentioned this in previous podcasts. That's one of the benefits for me doing this is reevaluating certain songs, listening to them again with lyrics in front of me, whether or not sometimes the lyrics are incorrect. And I'm this is a completely unrelated to the song we're doing, but with the release of the Beautiful Ones book last month, there's the handwritten lyrics to Soft and Wet. Soft and Wet, for whatever reason, there's lines in that song that have been misheard, misinterpreted, mistranscribed over the years, and so like the entire internet is just filled with incorrect interpretations of lines from that song. But now we have proof through Prince's handwritten lyrics that have been published in the Beautiful Ones. This is what the lyrics to Soft and Wet are. I'm hoping that all of these lyric websites exist out there, fix that so we can eliminate these incorrect lyrics, because now we finally have proof, written proof from the man himself, what these lines should be.
Oh my gosh. Do you have to go back and re-record your podcast about Soft and Wet, or are you good?
I'm good, because I did an episode, a side episode that clarified it, because I did the lyrics to that song. I did that episode, and I questioned the lyrics because they didn't make sense to me.
Right.
And a listener caught it, and they wrote into me. They wrote me a message and told me what the line should be. How that listener knew, I don't know. I asked him, and I never got a response back. But he got it right. I mean, the lines he told me way back, earlier back in the spring of this year, 2019, way before the Beautiful Ones came out, he told me what those lines actually were, and they match up 100% to what was written in the Beautiful Ones book. And so I did a a side episode to correct that way back when, because I really felt like, having gotten it wrong and so wrong, I really felt like I needed to do it over.
Score one for the listeners. All right.
Yeah, like I said, I was very thankful for that, because it finally clarified things and made, a light bulb go on in my brain. Like, that makes sense. What was written on the internet was gibberish. So.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Right.
Well, you have some good listeners, man. I'm telling you, they were on it. Yep.
Yeah, I do. Impressive. I'm thankful for every one of them. That's for sure. Okay, so then we get to the bridge, and in the bridge, the first line in the bridge, soldiers are marching. They're writing brand new laws. Will we all fight together for the most important cause? Will we all fight for the right to be free? Soldiers are marching right off the bat in the bridge, and that's, I mentioned when we were talking about what are those sounds at the beginning of the song. You and I both agree it kind of sounds like soldiers marching. And this line here in the bridge kind of strengthens, I guess, our opinion on that. It doesn't make it right or wrong. It adds more credence to our perspective on what we're hearing there when he's talking about soldiers marching right there in the bridge.
Yep, that's right. It's, I think it's kind of interesting, as I was thinking about the literal interpretation of it. Of course, I don't want to completely not discuss, that this was 1982. There was this huge fear of the proliferation of nuclear weapons, right? We were in this Cold War. I don't know if I 100% see Prince as a Cold Warrior, but I think it's also interesting to think about the fact that with this album, with 1999, Prince began to test the name The Revolution for his band, right? It's on the back cover. So this is the first time that we see Prince and The Revolution. So I don't think it's really a coincidence that we're talking about soldiers. Prince was sort of talking about his own revolution too. And, again, I don't want to dwell too much on things that Bobby Z has said, but he's been really interesting talking about this period. And he, in fact, there's a December 2016 issue of Minneapolis St. Paul magazine that had a huge feature on Bobby Z. And in it, Bobby said that, Bobby was in the hospital in 2010. He had a very serious heart attack, and Prince came to visit. And Prince said to Bobby's son, your dad was a good soldier. And, I don't want to draw too much meaning to that, except that I do think Prince saw this as a revolution. I do think he viewed himself somewhat as a revolutionary figure. And if you read this bridge that way, as he and his band are soldiers marching, writing brand new laws, there is an argument that he's talking about the Warner's contract. Will we fight for the most important cause? Because, otherwise, like Jason, I was sitting here going, who is he talking about? What soldiers? In the U.S., there weren't soldiers marching and writing new laws. Where? Right. What is, did you have any ideas about that?
No, I think when I hear these lines, I'm thinking more, I am taking a little bit of it literally when I've ever heard it before. Not necessarily talking about it in the United States, but just thinking of it like there's always that risk that there could be leaders that are elected that don't always have the people's best interests in mind, that there's going to be this, like the theory of 1984 theory where Big Brother's going to be looking after us and we're going to be living in a society that doesn't have these freedoms anymore. Freedom of choice is going to start to dwindle. We're going to be given two options, and then pick this or that. And this idea that this could happen, I feel like it was still very much a part of living in that era, living at that time, the idea that we were going to become a dictatorship or that we were going to be living in a society with where we're going to be watched, and making sure that I mean, a lot of art from that time and a little bit forward thought of technology really kind of eroding some of our freedoms away. And it's still that way. People are a little afraid now. You talk to some people like, oh, well, soon we're just going to be a number. We're going to have chips implanted into our brain. The government's going to watch us at all times and know what we're up to. There's been movies about being able to predict crimes in advance based off of technology. And Prince, I don't want to say feared the future or feared technology, but there was certainly some caution, and he expressed that caution a lot on this album. But in other albums as well, the song "Party Up" that we did together, he is concerned about being drafted again. So I mean, there's like this distrust of government still, I think, a little bit buried underneath the surface, and distrust of authority figures, distrust of older generations that maybe are afraid of the youth of that time. So writing brand new laws, I mean, I don't know exactly specifically what he's referring to in that line, but all I just think of is the stuff that we still, that we're still kind of concerned about as a society today. Like we have these freedoms now, but you just never know. You get the right leader in there that galvanizes a larger percentage of our population to give up some of these rights for whatever reason, because they feel like it's for the greater good or for safety, or, post 9/11 world, we gave up a lot of freedoms to travel and do things, go across borders. And I mean, I might be stretching it and I might be reaching, but part of me thinks that there's some concern there, always kind of ingrained in Prince a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like that. I mean, it's interesting what you're saying too about technology, because I don't know if you remember, but back then Time magazine would always have a man of the year, and yes, back then it was always a man. But
Yeah.
do you know who it was in 1982?
I don't know. Bill Gates?
Close. It was the computer.
Oh, the computer. Okay.
Yep. And so, this is very timely with 1999. There was a huge amount of concern about our computers taking over. Are they going to take over the world? Are they going to, like you said, there was a fear about that. And I mean, it's funny now, because in retrospect, it seems like, oh, it's impossible that this ever would have happened. But the fear of nuclear annihilation, that was real.
Yeah.
People really thought that was going to happen. I mean, I remember in high school, we had to watch this movie. It was called On the Beach. It was an Australian movie. It was essentially, these people living post-nuclear annihilation. It was this apocalyptic movie.
Yeah.
And that's what they were showing the kids. We really thought that was very potentially in our future. So it's almost like now it's impossible, with the benefit of where we sit now. It seems like, oh yeah, right, that would never have happened. But we didn't know at the time. It was a huge fear. It was on everybody's minds. I mean, in high school, we were scared. We were really scared. And I mean, the best thing we were told was, we had these sort of drills, and, we were supposed to sit under our desk or something, which, I'm sorry, this little piece of plywood and metal isn't really
Nope.
going to do much in the face of nuclear annihilation, but okay.
Yeah,
So,
duck and cover. Nice try, though.
yeah. Exactly. I guess every generation has their thing, right? But yeah, I mean, this was a real and present thing in people's minds, and I think the bridge shows it, very much so.
Yeah, I had to mention, also, we're talking soldiers, and what's the name that they call that's given to Prince's former bandmates? True funk soldiers. So,
Yep. Bobby Z was a soldier, according to Prince, right?
yeah,
So, yeah, I mean, again, we can read this on a lot of levels, which is what makes it fun.
Will we, and he's asking questions in the bridge, will we all fight together for the most important cause? Will we all fight for the right to be free?
Yeah.
I mean, the rhetorical questions that he's just kind of posing, I think, to get us to think, like, what's important to us for the most important cause? He doesn't tell us what that most important cause is, because everybody's going to have their own most important cause. Now, if freedom is the most important cause, and we're just talking about that very generally, okay, that's fine. I think most people, value freedom. What that means to them may vary, but we all have to kind of have that thing that we're going to fight for. And if it's freedom, freedom of what? And so we have to all decide that for ourselves. He's not going to decide for us. We have to know what that most important cause is and fight for that right.
This is very dramatic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very dramatic lines, yeah.
Yeah.
It is. He really goes there, and it suggests that we should all count our blessings. And I mentioned that before because I think that that's still an important piece to this song, because now after that bridge, we start getting the guitar comes in, and it's a very big soaring guitar that goes through this last portion of the song, where he's just, at this point now, he's given up his falsetto. He set that aside. Now he's singing these lines in a more passionate way, free to change my mind, free to go almost anywhere, anytime. And he sings these lines again. There's many a man who's not. Be glad for what I had. Be glad for what I've got. And also in this last section of the song, as I mentioned, he's singing way more passionately. He's not in falsetto anymore. There's a soaring guitar in the background. In this section, he's got background singers. And so they're kind of like repeating his lines. So he'll say, free to go most anywhere, anytime. And then in the background, you'll hear these women singing the same lines behind them. And this song is notable. I'm sure that you have recognized this as well from your research, that this has been considered Wendy Melvoin's first appearance on a Prince song, which is interesting.
That's right. Certainly not her last, but yeah,
No.
the first in the catalog. That's right. Wendy, Lisa, right, is also singing, and Vanity and Jill Jones. Is that right?
That's what's listed in the credits. Like if you go to the Prince Vault, it's up. They're all listed there. They're all listed as, and that's a very reputable website in terms of Prince information. So obviously they're in the background, so there's no way that you can pick out any of their voices. Just like, oh yeah, that's definitely Vanity back there. So there must have been some sort of documentation, or somebody who was there said, here's all the people that were part of that background singing section. Wow. And Wendy wouldn't join the band for another year plus if this was recorded in April of '82, because it was like, wasn't it like mid '83 or somewhere around that time that she joined?
Yeah, this was really early on.
So that's basically how the song ends. He repeats all these lines, kind of just stuff from the chorus with, like I said, a lot more passion, a lot more grittiness to it, the guitar. But then it gets real quiet again, and the guitar solo ends, and then it's just him and his piano, just the way it started. It ends in the same fashion. So I like how it comes full circle that way. It starts really quiet with piano, gets really big and loud and dramatic, and then it ends very quietly and beautifully. And that ending for this song really strikes me. It really sticks with me. How do you feel about the ending of the song?
Yeah, it is a full circle kind of song, isn't it? It ends the way it begins. I mean, it's such a, it's such a satisfying song in a lot of ways. I think it's, the one thing we haven't talked about is how often Prince played this song in concert. I mean, were you struck by that? I was really struck.
Yeah, it was recorded for the One Night Alone album, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was on the album. Yeah, that's right. So it was not only on 1999, but it was on One Night Alone, which is 2001.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he played it very regularly. I mean, even, during the Love Sexy tour, he played it, and touchingly, he played it during the piano and microphone tour. I mean, the last tour
Yep.
of his life. Prince Vault says that the last time Free was played live was February 20th, 2016 at the Sydney Opera House, which was, an incredible setting. So I think Free is a song that I can imagine, as a performer would be fun to perform live because it's easy for the crowd to sing. The chorus is easy. It's simple. Be glad you're free, free to change your mind. You know what I mean? It's a very
Yeah.
simple chorus. It's catchy. It's not, he doesn't sing the chorus in his falsetto. He sings it in like a real person register that
Yeah.
a lot of us could at least attempt to sing along. It's a great kind of stadium anthem. The words are easy. It's fun to sing. So I can see why he played it a lot during his career.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. He did play it a lot. It was a song that he certainly held on to throughout his career. Even though it was written a very long time ago, the messages here, and I kind of alluded to it when we were talking about the bridge and just some of the things that, may have led to the line "Soldiers are marching, they're writing brand new laws." I really feel like all of these lyrics, unlike a song like Annie Christian or Ronnie Talk to Russia, those songs are very dated and of a specific time. This song has lyrics that are timeless, and the message here applies in 1982, it applies in 1995, it applies in 2001, it applies in 2016, it applies forever because freedom, as human beings, we crave that, we need that. We need that freedom, whether or not it's physical freedom, mental freedom. It's something that everybody can relate to. And as you said, it's a easy sing-along song. We can all get on board with it. It's not sexually explicit, so later on in his career, it's a song that he can sing without changing the words, and it can mean different things to different people as they're singing it. They can all think back to their own lives and what they're maybe struggling with and apply it there. So it doesn't have to mean one thing. It's general enough that it allows it to be interpreted in any way we want it to interpret, but it's also specific enough about freedom, which we can all get behind, I think. And that's what makes it a timeless song, and that's what makes it so important.
I think that's all true. And, as I was reading The Beautiful Ones, Prince's memoir, it was published in late October of 2019. And I just wanted to say one line that Prince, it's in the book, and Dan Piepenbring, who is the co-writer, he was hired to write with Prince. Piepenbring says that Prince told him this, and it's a quote: "If I want this book to be about one overarching thing, it's freedom, and the freedom to create autonomously without anyone telling you what to do or how or why."
Yeah.
He said it from the beginning of his career to the end of his career, and I'm so grateful for the chance to talk about this with you, Jason. Thank you. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
I'm glad that you have taken your freedom to join me today, because I think there's enough going on in this song that really, really speaks to having another opinion. Now, I could probably get 5 or 6 other guests, and we might all have different thoughts on the lyrics, depending on what would be really cool is to have different people from different backgrounds, just coming from different countries, and how this song really means to them, and that would be so cool. So I'm really hoping that listeners who maybe live in a different part of the world, or maybe had a different upbringing, can listen to this song and maybe tell me how this song means to them, because it's a deep song, and it doesn't have to mean necessarily like literal freedom in the society that you're in, like a democratic society. It can mean so many things, and how we should all be thankful. And I'm thankful that I have the freedom to create a podcast talking about Prince's lyrics, because I've really enjoyed it. I'm up to episode 43 now. This is episode 43.
Woohoo!
So,
Yay!
yeah, and so
Making some progress.
It's progress, and I am just thankful to be here, healthy, happy, and able to talk about the lyrics to a man who created a lot of really, really amazing music. This song is timeless. The song is beautiful. And I wanted to thank Laura Tiebert for joining me. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Jason. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you as well. This has been the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast. I've been your host, Jason Brenninger. Big thank you again to Laura Tiebert. And until next time, goodbye.